Yeah, hi there. These comments are for 1026. I am Michael, your English language program for instructor for TOEFL Level 6. You completed the very first TOEFL Integrated Speaking Practice Test in our course, and right now I'm going to go ahead and listen to it. So let's listen to the whole thing one time. I won't make any comments at all, and then the second time I listen to it, I will evaluate it, I'll give you a score, I'll explain any strengths and weaknesses that you have with your speaking.
In the reading passage, the author believes that the advertising have a great effect on people's behavior. For example, if a politician has the advertising, it's a better way to make public familiar or remember with him or her name. And likewise, billboards and radio ads also have the same influence. And for the speaking section, there are two students talking about the article of advertising in the newspaper, and then they think that it influences people in some economic way. For example, a person might buy a certain brand of toothpaste just because he's familiar with the toothpaste advertising, and also he thinks that we are affected by advertising, and it's really important to people to aware of how advertising work.
Okay, so my first impression is maybe 2.5 out of 4. And I'm going to listen to it again. I'll explain why. So, yeah, probably 19 points out of 30, 2.5. Let's listen to it one more time. So let's pay attention a little bit more closely to what you said and how you said it and your structure and all of that.
The author believes that the advertising have a great effect on people's behavior.
Okay, so my first suggestion is before talking about the reading passage, you want to have an introduction that frames the reading and the listening. For example, you might say the reading and the listening passage discuss the political and economic effects of advertising. So you could do that in the beginning, and then once you've explained the introduction, then you can move to what you're doing right now, which is the reading passage. Now let me check subject-verb agreement here.
In the reading passage, the author believes that the advertising have a great effect on people.
Advertising has a great effect. It kind of sounded like you're saying advertising have. So you want to use a singular verb with advertising. In this case, it's kind of like an uncount noun.
For example, if a politician has the advertising, it's a better way to...
I would say if the politician advertises, maybe use that as a verb, and that might be a little bit less awkward. So you're having some minor hesitations and pauses in there that kind of interrupt your fluency.
Familiar will remember with he or her name, and likewise...
And we'll remember, let's go back to what you just said there.
To make public familiar will remember with he or her name.
And they will remember his or her name. In that case, I think the possessive adjectives his or her work better.
And likewise, billboards and radio ads also have the same influence.
No, let me look what you just said there. I think you have a...
With he or her name. And likewise, billboards.
Likewise, good transition word. I like that. You're trying to show the similarities between certain parts of the reading passage, showing how they're connected. So using transition words, that's a good strategy. Makes it easier to see how things are connected.
Radio ads also have the same influence. And for the speaking section, there are two...
Now that was awkward. And for the speaking section, I wouldn't say it like that. You might say the listening passage adds to the information in the reading by discussing economic effects of advertising. If you do that, that'll be a little bit smoother transition, and then you're explaining what the relationship is between the two sources.
The article of advertising in the newspaper, and then they think that it influences people in some economic way. For example, a person might buy a certain brand of toothpaste just because he's familiar with the
just because he is familiar with the toothpaste or the brand because it was advertised, right? So don't forget that be verb. I know it doesn't really have a lot of meaning, but you want to make sure that your sentences have subjects and verbs. So because he is familiar with.
Toothpaste advertising, and also he thinks that we are affected by advertising, and it's really...
I wouldn't say we. He thinks that consumers are affected by advertising. So don't use the personal pronouns when you're summarizing this kind of information. It makes it too personal. The purpose here is to create a more formal discussion of the information. So focusing on the third person, singular or plural forms is probably better. The third person, singular, plural points of view, I should say.
Important to people to aware of how advertising.
Important for people to be aware of how. So you didn't put your infinitive in there.
Advertising work.
Or how advertising works. Okay, so the next thing is, what is your score and why? I'm going to stand by the score I said before. 2.5 out of 4, 19 points out of 30. That's kind of where you are right now. If you go into this syllabus, I can figure out a grade. Also, 2.5, this is going to put you at 85% out of 100 on this assignment. Now, the question is, what can you do, right, to get better, if anything? So you might want to go to my website right now. If you want to pause the video, I'm going to go over some things. Okay, so first of all, vocabulary is actually pretty good. I'm not worried about that too much. You seem to use the right words to explain the information. Pronunciation, you can probably work on that a little bit more. One lesson is syllable division and grammatical word endings, sometimes with your S's. You're not putting S's on the ends of your verbs sometimes. Sometimes that's a pronunciation thing. It's not necessarily a grammar thing. Anyway, speak clearly lesson number 26, 27, 28. Those are good lessons for you to take a look at right now. The other one, I'm going to say speak clearly lesson 41, 42, 43, and 44. This is called thought groups and blending. So sometimes when you're speaking, you have some awkward pauses and hesitations in there. And you need to speak a little bit faster with fewer pauses, fewer hesitations. So I think those lessons are good. Grammatically speaking, I don't think there's anything major. Just be careful, make sure you're not forgetting your verbs, right? Your be verb, for example. I don't really have a lesson on that, but just remember to put the verbs in the sentences that you're saying. All right, so thank you for doing the assignment. So maybe some final tips. Anything that you can do right now to increase your exposure to English is actually a good thing, right? So watching TV is good, reading the newspaper, reading magazines, listening to the radio, talking to native speakers, that kind of a thing. So work on that exposure, get a little bit more exposure to the language. And then on your next response, I want you to try to talk a little bit faster with fewer pauses and hesitations in there. Try to follow the principles I teach you in Speak Clearly lessons number 41 through 44 in regards to thought groups and blending. All right? Thank you.